Greetings. Let's talk about decision making. This is a dense topic, normally covered in a 4 to 5 hour workshop. But in this high speed version, I would introduce the key concepts of smart decision making, covering what do bad decisions look like, why make smart decisions, and how to make them, what are the tools involved, and so on and so forth. So, in big and small corporations, I see a concerning trend. People are working harder and harder to clean up the mess left by poor decisions. In my opinion, two main factors contribute to our lack of capacity of making good decisions. First, we don't have the time to think, and second, we don't have a firm understanding of how the world works. If you understand the world as it really is, not as you would wish it should be, you will begin to make better decisions. These better decisions will also free up your time, reduce stress, allow you to spend more time with your family, and of course, bring happiness in whatever you do. That leads us to the question, how can we make better decisions? Quick 30 seconds about me. I grew up in a small mining town of India, moved to Silicon Valley, and after a few odd jobs, tried my hand at entrepreneurship. Economics wise, it was not a great success, but full of learning otherwise. Many lessons learned, many experiments successfully concluded. Due to a few uninformed decisions, I had to move back to India. In India, I bumped into other entrepreneurs and, with their help, started India's first venture accelerator, which turned out to be a fantastic success beyond my imagination. Fast forward a few years, I started a mobile security venture with a few friends, raised venture money, sold that company to Oracle, and made a U turn back to Silicon Valley. I still write code and working on a few projects to keep my Unix shell busy. So you get good at decision making by building your own muscle, by experimenting, by failing, by succeeding, by getting to know people and your own limitations in working with people around you. Each one of the companies I've worked for has been a source of learning. I made plenty of mistakes, I made bad decisions, I made good decisions, and of course succeeded in many projects. Each of these logos you see have a unique story to tell. I hope I could go back in time and correct a few serious mistakes at the companies I worked for. But then you learn and live life looking forward. So let us look at the dictionary definition of the word decision. It's a conclusion or a resolution reached after consideration. The operating word here is consideration. Consideration means reflection, our thought process, our thinking process of analyzing the outcome of things which are going to happen around that decision. Consideration, the word itself, gives a feeling of a slow to a medium paced process. Unfortunately, consideration has been lost in the decision making process. Why? We want to project ourselves as superheroes that makes high speed decisions and kill the monsters at the speed of thought. So the big question is, why learn to make smart decisions? So as you know, due to internet, we are becoming hyper skilled. Hard skills are getting easier to master day by day. Internet has all the information in the world. There are online learning courses, MOOCs that are destroying the notion of a traditional classroom. There are encyclopedias, and above all, there's real-time peer-to-peer help in various marketplaces from experts. What's missing is soft skills, and I believe decision making is a very important soft skill to have. Everything remaining equal, our success and failure in life would be defined by decisions we make. If we all are handed the same deck of cards, organized in exactly the same way, what would happen? The person with the best decision making capability wins. This is exactly what is happening in life within your organization or at your home. By learning to make smarter decisions, you remove the blind spots and win. You want to have a process of better decision making so that you don't have to solve the problems later on. This is as easy as learning to maintain your car, doing regular tune-ups, oil change, filter change, and remove the hassle of bigger problems later on. As human beings, decision making is like building a mental muscle, and you need to practice and exercise to build it. So you may say that you already have a good decision making capability because you analyze a problem. In reality, analysis is just one part. What you need is a process. Dan Lovello and Oliver Siboney did a study and reported in McKinsey Quarterly, where they found out that in the 1,000 major organizations which they researched, the companies that made most major decisions were not done by gut calls, but by rigorous analysis. They found out that strong decisions or good decisions had a process that mattered more than analysis by a factor of 6. So, analysis is a good start to remove the gut feel decision making, but people who are analyzing may have their own biases. Are they considering the outcome which they love or which they like, or they're taking the viewpoints which contradict their own viewpoints? Are they biased by the viewpoints of senior executive who are influencing that outcome? In contrast, process ensures that analysis is objective and fact driven rather than gut driven. No good decision backed by a strong process is based on poor analysis. Why? Because a good process always weeds out bad analysis. Let's look at our legal system. Imagine walking into a courtroom. There, the trial consists of a prosecutor presenting 20 slides of PowerPoint. In 20 pretty compelling charts, he demonstrates why the defendant is guilty. The judge then challenges some of the facts of the presentation, but the prosecutor always has a good answer to every objection. So the judge decides, and the accused man is sentenced. That wouldn't be due process, right? So if you would find this process acceptable in this particular courtroom, why is it acceptable when you make any other decision? So where is this weakness in the decision-making process in most organizations and in your life in general? So these weaknesses are, number one, we fool ourselves. We are not as rational as we think. We fool ourselves that we are objective and unbiased. Number two, we are not ready and make decisions on the fly. And this is a big one. We want to make quick decisions because that is what pop culture and movies have made us believe. The rush of adrenaline and anticipation of dopamine manipulates the decision-making process and changes the outcome. Number three, we don't gather enough information, but rely on anecdotes and projections made by other people who have vested interest. This also adds to the laziness and apathy in our overall decision-making process. Other factors which could contribute to our bad decision-making capability is we are overconfident. We look for information that fits our thoughts and ignore information that doesn't. We are overly influenced by authority, which happens in big companies all the time. We choose the short term over long term. And once we have made a decision, we find it hard to change our mind. In short, our brains get overwhelmed with emotions and get into flawed thinking. In a nutshell, we are engulfed by the villains of decision making. Now, let us take a pause for 15 seconds and reflect on some of the popular examples of bad decisions, from history to recent political developments or a decision which you took and now know that it was bad. Once you have thought of an example, think of one or two reasons of that bad decision. Think about it. I'll take a pause and come back with my own examples. Popular examples which come to my mind: attack in the Middle East based on weapons of mass destruction, which were never to be found. Another one comes from World War II. Hitler's choice of allies was based on his own racist beliefs than anything else. There are many decisions in corporate America. To give you some pointers, you could read about AT&T deciding against launching wireless phones and citing a research of its small market. Of course, AT&T course corrected 2 decades later by buying Singular Wireless. Another one is AOL passing on an investment and a subsequent acquisition opportunity in Google for less than a few $1,000,000. Another one is Coca-Cola launching New Coke based on a small study only to retract that drink from the market. Do you see a pattern in these examples? Poor data, maybe biases, constrained thinking of existing products, overconfidence about the market themselves. The examples you thought and the reason behind those bad decisions can be categorized into one of the 4 villains of bad decisions. Chip and Dan Heath, 2 brothers, wrote this wonderful book that helps us make better decisions. It's a quick read, but I recommend that you annotate and flag and bookmark it as you go so that you can revisit the important concepts. So as per the book, these are the 4 villains. Number 1, narrow framing. Narrow framing is where we limit our choices to start with. For example, if you're not happy in a relationship, you would think, shall I break up with my partner? You should instead be asking, what would take to make that relationship work? So a little bit more open-ended question rather than a black or white, shall I break up with my partner, yes or no? Number two, confirmation bias. When we have opportunity to collect information, we choose only those data points which support our pre-existing beliefs. We pretend that we are looking for truth, but in reality, we are searching for reassurance. The search for weapons of mass destruction in the previous example is a good one. Iraq had already ceased production of WMDs, but the then Bush administration asserted their presence based on incorrect data. Number three, or the number third villain, is emotion. This is obvious and self-evident. We let the information churn in our head, often coupled with anger, sadness, depression, joy, anticipation of reward. These emotions block a data-driven process. Corporate America and general Wall Street greed suffers from this all the time. CEOs and founders decide based on their own emotions of fear and greed than anything else. Number four is overconfidence. We think we know more than what we do about how the future will unfold and our understanding of the market, the customers, and the world around us. The failure of New Coke in the previous example I gave is a good one about overconfidence. Coke had the data, it had done market research, but with a small group of customers, and was confident that larger customer base would accept the new Coke. However, its data was flawed, customer research was biased. Joseph Tussman, a professor at UC Berkeley, Department of Philosophy, was a key proponent of decision-making theories. He was also a key figure in free speech movement of 1964 at UC Berkeley. What the quote means is that we have to learn to cooperate with the world and not fight with it, fully knowing that it may yield nothing. With all due respect for the brilliance of inventor and scientist Nikola Tesla, his inability to work with others cost him the Nobel Prize and a fortune which could have been in billions of dollars today. These four bullets are the framework you need for making smart decisions. The world around us impacts our decisions, so knowing how the world works is important. That's number one. Number two is our biases. Most of us rarely use a process for thinking and about decision making. If we do use one, it is most likely to be the pros and cons list. While the pros and cons list is better than nothing, this approach is deeply flawed because it doesn't really account for biases. So reining our biases or taming our biases becomes important. Number three is having a framework and a set of toolboxes to make better decisions. Because I think that decision making is no different than the way a plumber approaches to fix a leak. He uses a set of tools, a checklist, his area of expertise, his domain knowledge to fix a leak. If the leak is adjoining an electrical outlet, he calls an electrician to help him out rather than attempting to fix it by himself. That's the same strategy we can use for making decisions, using tools and our skills and our domain knowledge. And finally, number four in the how to make smart decision is debugging, auditing, and logging. Logging of the results of decisions and the variables affecting them helps us analyze the outcome and refine as we go. So number one is learning how the world works. So why learn how the world works? Our decisions are not just internal within our mind, but are a response to external stimuli. The data for a decision is generated by the people around us, or the outcome would impact the people around us. Knowing the foundations of science and history teaches us how the world works and how it behaves when certain control variables are modified. The laws of physics, the theory of evolution and natural selection, and most importantly, our history of last 10 to 20,000 years teaches us the mistakes made by civilizations and its leaders. History serves an important lesson for us to not repeat the same mistakes again. The civilizations which are no longer remembered are dead not because of natural causes, but most of the times because of bad decisions, neglect, and lack of preparation by their leaders. Let's look at the foundations of physics and math in decision making. Now keep in mind that unlike laws of, say, motion in physics, decision making is not an exact science, but The universal laws are very much analogous to decision making. Velocity has a vector, speed does not. If you move 15 miles north and then 20 miles south, your net displacement is negative 5 miles. So running fast is not important. Idea is for you to make positive progress. Same in decision making, slow but forward progress. Multiplication by zero. Failure is cascading. If your car engine fails, your gearbox cannot move it forward, or your wheels could be turned, but then it may require horses and manual labor to pull it forward. A bad decision at the foundational level impacts all future good or bad decisions. In an organization, a poor quality product not only impacts customer satisfaction, but cascades failure into future revenue, employee morale, attrition, and eventual bankruptcy. Relativity. We cannot understand the system, we are part of it. We have to distance ourselves or find a party who is unbiased. We don't notice the earth moving since we are part of it. It is spinning at 100,000 kilometers per hour without us realizing. Similarly, for smart decision making, you need to make yourself an onlooker to your own decision process to make an informed decision. Next is leverage. How can you move things with small amount of input force? Archimedes famously said, "Give me a liver long enough and I shall move the world." In real world, when making a decision in a group, you try to come at a common understanding instead of challenging the viewpoints right away. You get a leverage first before going after a daunting task. Mutual trust, finding a common theme between parties helps build that leverage to help you make better decisions. Next is randomness. If you win in gambling in your first hand, you would probably be convinced that the odds are with you. In reality, this is just randomness. Knowing the randomness tames your overconfidence and your own data to come out at better in decision making. The last one is compounding. Small incremental change accumulates as a large return over a period of time. Similarly, in decision making, you want to make slightly better decision daily and accumulate it over a period of time. So just like laws of science, laws of biology applies to decision making as well. So competition is not only the life of trade, it is the trade of life. Peaceful when plentiful in terms of resources, violent when the number of mouths to feed outrun the food. Animals eat one another all the time without second thoughts. Civilized men like us consume one another by due process of law. I believe cooperation is real and increases with social development, but mostly because it is a tool and a form of competition. We cooperate in our group, our family, our community, our church, our club, our race, our nation, in order to strengthen our own group in its competition with other groups. In the competition for food or mates or power, some organisms succeed while others fail. In the struggle for existence, some individuals are better equipped than others to meet the tests of survival. This leads to selection. And of course, we all know that nature has no use for organisms and their variations or groups that cannot reproduce in abundance. Organisms, food, and fruits that have survived today were successful in breeding. Others who could not became fossils for future study. Now, why these lessons are important in decision making? Because to win in the long term, you learn from biology that you have to learn to survive and to coexist and to beat the competition if you have to survive first. Hence, while making a decision, what may look like a losing argument may increase your chances of survival and then to come around and win tomorrow. We see this in Silicon Valley, where startups flush with money make poor decisions, overhire, overspend in sales and marketing and in engineering, and then crash and burn before even the market is ready. While startups, which are lean and mean and do smart cash management, go for the long term and win. There are many examples in human history which teach us how civilizations were created and torn down by nature, by geological forces, and by non-cooperating humans. Reading the lessons from human history provide us with the most reliable path to understanding the present and anticipating the problems of future. Over the course of history, human behavior has changed, but not human nature. No matter who is in power, the rewards gradually accrue to the most clever and talented individuals. And I believe that ideas are the strongest things of all in human history because They have been passed down and have been responsible for changing the behavior of future generations. You'd find many inventions that became synonymous with the civilizations that created them. For example, paper invented in China during the Han Dynasty, abacus during the Roman Empire, and decimal system during early days of civilization in India. There are many other great examples. These are the ideas that survived the test of time. History repeats itself because human nature does not change. As society becomes stable and peaceful, we have an ingrained way of responding to situations like hunger, danger, and sex, which is similar and correlatable in various individuals. As I mentioned earlier, the civilizations who learned to survive and adapted to changes in nature and world are the ones whom we remember today. We all know how the Japanese forces rationalized their attack on Pearl Harbor, thus dragging America into the war. Post facto, we all know from the release of classified documents that it was a war which America did not want to fight, which looked like a good decision in hindsight. So, learning to make smart decisions is like learning these historical, real life case studies of civilizations, of empires and nations and people during those times. So, the number one was how the world works in smart decision making. And the number two is getting rid of your biases, or rather, reining or taming your biases. Our preconceived notions about people, things, concepts impede in making smart decisions. The bias could be because of an emotional reaction to a past event. While laws of science history are external factors, bias is very much internal and in our minds, and something which is in our control. These biases result because of how our memory works, how it recalls information, and of course, how our emotions spin what we do not know. If I ask you what causes more deaths, mosquitoes or sharks, you would immediately jump to conclusion about sharks being evil. This is because of what we may have seen on TV or may have read on the internet, but in reality, mosquitoes cause close to 1 million deaths every year. However, sharks less than 100. The shark versus mosquito is an example of availability bias. Our memory recalls the most frequent and important or impactful information and makes us believe that is a fact. Next one is first conclusion bias. First idea gets in and then the mind shuts. What it means is it is a tendency where the first concept we understand is used as an anchor for every other conversation. This bias is exploited by product and promotions and in marketing, most famously by car dealers who have a few lost leader vehicles that are deeply discounted and advertised to bring foot traffic into their stores. Our brains are made to believe that such discounts exist on every model and make of the car in the parking lot of that particular dealership. The reality is otherwise. Hindsight bias. I told you so, knew it all along. The hindsight bias makes us believe that we know the outcome from the get go. Haven't we looked back at an event and thought that such and such was predictable all along? Essentially, after we know the outcome, we piece together an explanation of the outcome that it was bound to happen. In reality, the outcome was an indeterminate event in its own course of conclusion. Fourth is confirmation bias, seeking reassurance rather than gathering new facts. Confirmation bias is what we start believing in what we visualize. We try to interpret information as to not distort our own premeditated conclusions. We don't tend to seek out new pieces of information which could cause discomfort and mental load. We look for shortcuts to prove a conclusion known to us, which leads to confirmation bias. In my earlier example, America's premeditated attack on Iraq was a confirmation bias on information, or rather about information on weapons of mass destruction. In a nutshell, these biases make us fail at interpreting information in a non-partisan way, which leads to bad decisions. If we understand our own limitations, biases, and how the mind works, how our memory recalls information, we'll be aware of the data which seems to support our view, we'll be able to make smart decisions. Number three is having a larger mental model as part of a toolbox for decision making. As I alluded to in the plumber example, you need tools and a process for arriving at a desired outcome. Mental models are your tools which help you codify the process quantitatively rather than using an ad hoc analysis of incomplete facts. These tools use your expertise in various disciplines, your domain knowledge, your experience using them in the past, and your learning from earlier decisions. Many of these tools and frameworks originated as a philosophical proposals by their authors, but as you start writing the mental process, these are no longer discussions within your mind, but argued and disserted and written down. These mental models are most effective in conquering biases, validating and invalidating inference based on analogies of science and learnings from history. So the cheapest mental model, what you may have used, is a pros and a con list. It's in reality, it's not a mental model. It's a tool for analyzing a situation. There are over 20 or 24 mental models. Let's look into a few of them. The first one is inversion. Just tell me how I'm going to die so that I never get there. Instead of finding out how to be happy, try to answer what guarantees sadness. For example, trying to answer what guarantees sadness, you could say binge watching on Netflix the whole weekend guarantees sadness. You could say overuse of Facebook every day guarantees sadness. Or you could say eating junk food all days of the week 3 times in a day guarantees sadness. So in order to become happy, you eliminate the things which guarantee sadness. So now, once you know that the sadness comes from one of these 3 examples I gave, you work the problem backwards by eliminating the source of sadness to arrive at the positive outcome, which is the original question, how to be happy. So if your junk food makes you feel sad, then eliminating junk food makes you happy. Often success comes in life from knowing what to avoid, and this is as easy as it sounds, rather than what to look for. This is also a technique of avoiding stupidity and common mistakes. It forces you to consider other options. So the next mental model is Occam's razor, simplest explanation with the least moving parts. What it means is, what Occam's razor states that the simplest solution is correct when we have not much data. It's a tool for finding quick solutions when not much information is available, and often eliminating excessive complex solution without having any information about various variables around it. Next is Hanlon's razor, never attribute to malice that which can be explained by neglect. Let's say you took Uber in the morning and driver took a wrong turn, and then it happened again after a few months. You could label the driver as corrupt and trying to take you through a longer route, but you could give him the benefit of doubt. That's the Hanlon razor. And you could argue that, hey, the reason he's taking through a longer route because the map may be wrong, or he has more information that you personally have. Or maybe he's a brand new driver who does not know about the routes which you are used to taking. It is a model of giving other person the benefit of doubt. Hanlon razor is an effective tool for managing office politics. If someone did not respond to your email, do not assume ill will, but share neglect, incompetence, or laziness. Next is second order thinking, self-evident that effects have effects. So this is a model used in thinking through secondary and tertiary effects of a decision. For example, if you want to make money in stock market, first order thinking chooses a stock and makes a bet, while second order thinking asks for diversification. What if the stock goes down? What if the stock market as a whole goes down? Good decision making requires thinking through of next and what is next after next and beyond that. Last one on the mental model example is map is not territory. What it means is reality is different than what is the perception of abstracted data. For example, every summarized report on your dashboard hides granular data point. The chart gives you a trend, but not the reasons for the trend. If you read a candidate's resume, the reality may be different than what is shown in the resume. And that is why you have an interview process to get to the bottom of the candidate's thought process. It is for us to use the map or resume as a guide to further exploration and validation. For example, in the build-up to financial crisis, banks knew very little about the ultimate borrowers. So these were some of the key mental models. These are the tools for reality testing your assumptions and negating your biases as described earlier. Number four in how to make decision is keeping a decision journal. So having the skills, learning how the world works, taming your biases, using mental models, all of those gives you a good framework for making smart decisions. But like everything else, you have to learn to collect your own historical nuggets of decision making. This is where a decision journal comes along. Good decision does not ensure success, but bad ones always ensure failure. Our memories work in unique ways. Many things which we encounter, see, and act upon may be forgotten when we encounter a similar situation later on. To help understand how each one of us make decisions, it is important to keep a log of important decisions. Why we made them, when we made them, and how we made them. What were the circumstances around them? What were the forces of nature? What was our state of mind when the decision was made? You'd be surprised when you look at the log after a few months. You could use tools such as Evernote or even as simple as Google Docs. You can go ahead and create a form in Google Docs and have a permanent searchable repository of decisions taken. And as listed on the slide, you could have these form fields such as situation, the variables, and outcomes in that particular Google Docs repository. Personally, I used to use a notebook a long time ago, but now I use Evernote and create a note which has the word decision in the title so that it makes it easy for me to search. So once you've started tracking your decisions, you have to revisit them. You have to have an audit checkpoint at a regular interval. If you are a knowledge worker like me, then audit your decisions quarterly. Go back to the Google Docs and Evernote and look at the decision which you have made. You'll be surprised how you could have gone back in time and changed some of those decisions. The audit is your review of the outcome and impact of the decision, whether it was right or wrong, and you come back and refine and improve your decision-making process. So wrapping up the session, let me quickly summarize. The key point on why make smart decision is that everybody has all the hard skills. Smart decisions differentiate between success and failure. Decision making is an art and a science. It is an art which is inside your mind, but is a science which you can learn and practice and get better at it. Biases are an impediment on your decision making process, and you have to learn about them to control them and be aware of them. Using mental models, which are techniques of identifying your own limitations and the world around you, you can tame those biases. Of course, we forget our own decisions and why we made them. So keep a log and audit it every 3 to 6 months. I want to thank numerous sources on the internet, blogs and books. I would highly recommend looking at this particular list, bookmarking them, subscribing to many of these blogs, reading the books by Chip and Dan Heath. I have read it a few times, researching in general on the internet about decision making, reading other people's case studies, and then trying to retrofit into your decision making process every day. And finally, good luck and happy decision making. Reach out to me on Twitter, and I'm actually working on a few other things related to this topic. Not going to disclose right now, but they're coming soon. Thanks and have a fantastic day ahead.